welcome. The show is in honor of, and as always, we bring you information about veterans, for veterans' families, and for the general public as well. Today we have some special guests, but first we have our co-host, Paul Dietrich. As always, Paul, thank you for putting the show together and making it happen. And now we have Monique Rada. Monique is the Staten Island representative for
New York City Department of Veteran Services.
DVS.
Yes.
Okay. And Eileen Barcine. Okay. Who's here with Monique. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Now let's see if I have it correct. U.S. Navy veteran, USS Tortuga.
Yes.
I did. And
yes.
Tell us a little bit about your service.
Yeah, so I joined the military in 2007. Okay. Pretty young, I'd say so myself. Was excited. I was deployed and sent to Sasebo, Japan, where I served on board the USS Tortuga for about 3 years. During that time, I was able to travel most of all of Southeast Asia. And so that really gave me a grip, an understanding of the Japanese culture, which I enjoyed. And yeah, it was really a prominent factor in my life. And it really kind of became something that I would never forget, because it really shaped me into the woman that I am today and the passion that I have for the veteran population.
Okay. Now, you also serve as president of the Daughters of Purpose?
Yes, I do. And so the Daughters of Purpose is a faith-based, community-based organization in Brooklyn. And what we do is we do a lot of outreach and community engagement to the people in the Bedford-Stuyvesant area, but also throughout New York City, really engaging them and trying to find ways to bridge the gap between faith and community. Yes. Okay.
So you do with that group the same thing that you do with DVS?
Yeah, so I serve all around. It's kind of what I do. I serve publicly, but then I also serve within the faith-based community, and I love it. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about DVS. What does DVS do?
Yes, so
and
DVS...
You are the Staten Island Rep, am I correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah. So I'm the newly appointed Staten Island Rep. And DVS it's actually, I won't say fairly new, because we're actually entering our 4th year. But it's the first city agency that's solely dedicated to the veterans and family members, as well as service members of New York City. What makes DVS so unique is the fact that we're like an umbrella. So we serve all veterans. So what I mean by that is, if you served one day, you've served, and so therefore we find services and find ways to help serve you. DVS has a wonderful housing unit, and we also have another unit that's entitled Engagement and Community Services. And what we do in that unit, myself and Eileen is a part of that unit, is we're actually out in the community really connecting with constituents, which is the veterans, and really looking to see how can we better serve them. So myself, I'm in Staten Island right now, but we have coordinators throughout all 5 boroughs available to serve in an array of issues.
Okay. Do the Staten Island problems that appear before DVS match the rest of the city's problems, other boroughs?
Yes and no. So Staten Island is unique on its own. So it's just seems to be like in a faraway galaxy when you think of New York City as a whole. So the services are unique, but one thing that we find that it's across the board is housing, the issue of housing, and veterans finding affordable housing and permanent housing. Another thing is benefits. So what I find out was with our veterans in Staten Island is it's been an influx and increase on wanting to know the services that they can be connected to. Also, a lot of our older veterans. So those veterans who are actually past the Vietnam era, those veterans in particular are needing services, in-house services, and finding ways to still receive benefits at their age and what's available to them, and also available to their family if they transition on.
Okay. Now, let me just change the direction just a little bit for now. If somebody wants to talk to you or get in touch with you, where can they reach you, and when can they reach you, and a phone number that they can reach you at?
Yes, so one way you can reach me is you can actually talk to me in person. I'm actually at the Staten Island Borough Hall on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And so you can reach me there, but also you can contact me via email at mrada, R-A-D-A, @veterans.nyc.gov. I don't know my work cell phone number by heart.
Okay. And would Eileen be reached at the same number?
No, so I'm the Manhattan coordinator. I'm stationed on 125th Street twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. So my phone number is 646-499-0055. And I can be reached by appointment, or we can do walk-ins as well.
Okay. Now, if they meet you in your office by appointment?
Yes.
Okay. They just
you
can't
can
walk
do
in?
walk-in. No, you can do walk-ins. So
Okay.
the beautiful thing about it is that you can actually do a walk-in. We prefer appointments because people can get backed up. You know, we might have one already in, so you might. It's just about the waiting process.
And then sometimes
Okay.
we have events and ready station inside our borough, so it's just best to make an appointment so that we can make sure we're there to meet the veteran or their
Right.
family members to assist them in any services they may need.
Right. Do you coordinate at all with any of the organizations, VFW, American Legion?
Yeah, so that's something that we're really developing and working on right now as we speak. So this year, year 4 for us, is really about dealing with the private sector, dealing with non-for-profits, and also community-based and veteran service organizations to really streamline and find ways to collaborate on different projects. And so one of those things that we're trying to do now is actually reach out to the Legions and the Post to find ways to collaborate and see how we can, one, engage, how can we serve, and how can we better enhance the community together.
But I'm also actually working with an American Legions on Castle Hill Avenue once a month.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. We had talked a little bit before, just changing the subject, about you as a female veteran coming into the service and your experiences. Could you talk a little bit about that? I think it's important to our viewing audience that they hear about that.
So just transitioning it's one thing in itself, but then also being a woman. And I think that it's so critical for us women veterans to make sure that we are self-identifying. A lot of times as a veteran, we don't identify. And when you don't identify as a veteran or you can't connect to being a veteran, you miss out on opportunities, you miss out on benefits that you qualify for, that you deserve, that you've earned. And so transitioning out, it's one thing to have the uniform on and we connect to that, but once the uniform is removed from us, it's kind of still identifying. We all don't look the same. People can see me and don't think I look like what you would consider a veteran. And so I think it's about changing the conversation and the culture around what our veteran population is looking like, because it's looking a lot different than it did 50 years ago. And so being able to identify and represent and make your voice be known is the only way we'll be able to progress and actually have services that are tailored fit for us.
Yep. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the existing veterans organizations seem to be pretty much tailored for men. But as I said before, the way that those organizations will change is by the female veterans coming out, joining the organizations, because the organizations are run by the members. So you have to be in them in order to change them. And I think this is the same even at the VA and at the other organizations. Right now, women veterans are the largest increasing population coming into the VA. So that organization will have to change simply because of the influx. But women have to identify and have to come out and join the organizations, go to the VA, and get what they earned.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Paul. And I think a lot of that has to do with the systematic kind of processes that have been in place for so many years. And so being able to feel comfortable to represent, it's hard enough to navigate the VA system, to navigate benefits, and to have to, try to navigate being a part of a team that you don't really feel a part of. So I think that we have to, when I mean we, I mean our veteran service organizations, our veteran Post, our veteran community, specifically New York, has to be more welcoming, and we have to find ways to engage and reach out to those women veterans, because they're not going to come out and feel confident in reaching out because of the things that they've known in the past, the things that they experienced in active duty. And so we have to kind of, as a population, veteran community, find ways to be more engaging. And as a city agency, we're trying to find ways as well to how do we get our women veterans to come out and support events? How do we get them to identify so that they can know what they deserve? And how can we collaborate more? So it's really about raising awareness, and having programming like this is the opportunity to start the conversation.
Sure. It's very important. Now, besides the housing issue, which is, of course, a major concern, do the veterans come to you for assistance with education benefits, health benefits.
Absolutely.
And are you prepared to help them along those lines?
Definitely. So because DVS is not a service provider, we actually coordinate. So we are like the liaisons between our veterans and the services that are an array of them in the city. So we do the navigating for them. And so we get veterans who come in for employment, education issues, spousal support, mental health
services.
It's an array. We've seen so many different cases. And like I like to say is that our veteran family and veteran constituents particularly, it's a unique case-by-case situation. So with DVS, we service all veterans regardless of discharge status. And that makes us very unique because if you served one day active duty, you served. If you signed on the dotted line, you served, and therefore we find ways to help you. What makes it complicated is because that's not the same for the state and it's not the same on the federal level. So we really have to find creative ways to navigate those services throughout the city.
Okay, so in reality, the city is giving more than the state and federal government for the veteran in some
I would say
issues.
we're giving more options. We're giving them more options because we have the room and space to do so, because we're not limited to the veterans that we serve.
Yep. And I can relate to this because recently the State Department of Veterans Services asked us to comment on their definitions of veterans. And you have the combat veterans, you have the served during a combat period, and you just have the veterans. And one of the things I noticed in there, for example, with combat veterans, was that they did not talk at all about people who had received hazardous duty pay or, well, you're still a combat veteran if you received hazardous duty pay. And the example I'll use is a Coast Guardsman serving off of the coast of Colombia doing drug interdiction. That person is a combat veteran. I'm sorry, they are. And there are other veterans like that that didn't serve when actual overseas combat ribbons were given, but because they received the hazardous duty pay, they are combat veterans. So the state is looking to change the definitions of veterans. The state also does not include those that served in the Reserve or National Guard as veterans. And in my own case, for example, I would not be classified as a federal veteran except for the fact that I deployed, because all of my career was in the reserves. And the sad part about that is, yes, this is about money at some point because somebody has to fund to pay for that. But the sad part about it is you're taking the same risk. You are signing on the line at, you know.
No, it's a great point. And honestly, it's a conversation that I've had several times, and it's constantly being brought up because it's frustrating for that veteran population to feel like they are less than or subpar than the veterans who actually went active duty throughout their whole career. And I think that I think it's wonderful that the state and even hopefully the federal level will look into this, because it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And so I'm thankful that DVS is really understanding of that and understands that there's cases happen, and how can we still help those veterans as best as we can, but also discharge statuses, because that's a whole nother issue, because you have veterans who get discharged with dishonorables for different reasons, and with the increase in now awareness of mental health, we can see that a lot of those things are also the Don't Ask, Don't Tell ban that was enacted, and you know, now with that being gone, trying to unravel those cases. So it's a lot of hot topics that are happening within the veteran space, and I think which is healthy, and I think it's good because those conversations start change, which is needed.
What would you give as advice to the general veteran out there? One of the things you talk about is identify. You know, and I think that could apply to both men and female, because I know an awful lot of guys that didn't identify themselves as veterans when they left the service. Particularly
during the Vietnam era, they didn't want to identify because the negative response they got.
Actually blotted that out of their career. And I'm one of those guys. I served my time, came out and came home to a hostile environment, and It was unbelievable what went on. And you asked me if I was a veteran. I said, no, I used to drive an ice cream truck, you know, whatever, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a conversation that happens often. Even my dad, so my dad was a Vietnam vet as well.
Right.
And a lot of that veteran population, it's a touchy topic because it's a stain in our history, unfortunately, that we didn't support and didn't really look out for those veterans who came home.
Exactly.
And like you said, and you mentioned it quite profoundly, you know, you weren't welcomed and it was hostile. You know, that's why the vet centers were created, because people couldn't go to the VA and get services because people were picketing and they were calling them all kinds of names and baby killers, right, to be specific, and all that. That's trauma. And people don't really recognize and honestly identify and talk about those kind of traumas that linger on. You don't forget those things that you happen. Transitioning alone, like we mentioned, coming from active duty, feeling important, being a part of a team, also having your own unique responsibilities that you're given, having a sense of purpose, a sense of helping, and then it changes, it's stripped in a sense when you're transitioning back. And now you have to get acclimated to being a civilian, and how do we do that? So it's definitely a necessary issue that's happening, and I'm hoping that we continue to work on progress and change.
Well, I think it's done a very big turnaround, but for a lot of people, it was too late.
Yeah.
They stayed away from, you know, getting involved. And
I'd like to go back to that transitioning subject, though, because, and I'll use myself again as the model. I was 2 years in Iraq, went to Fort Bragg, and 5 days later, I'm back on the street in New York. And it's just like a culture shock.
Yeah.
It's a total change. You have your buddies are gone. Your whole support system's gone, and you're back on the streets.
And you weren't in uniform, thank God.
No more at that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the reality out there, and I really think that that's part of the reason that we have as many societal problems as we do. I honestly think we treat prisoners better than we do our service people. At least as a prisoner, when you get out on parole, you get a parole guy. Somebody that you can contact. There's nothing like that in active duty. Now, I was fortunate. Maybe I was smart enough to go to the VA. And yes, that was very helpful. But quite a few of our people transitioning, our veterans transitioning, do not. And after 2 years, all I wanted to do was get out.
Right.
I wanted, at that point, nothing more to do with the service. And I really think that that is part of the problem. There was no evaluation for PTSD. There was no evaluation for traumatic brain injury. There was none of that. And now as a mentor in the courts here, I see these younger veterans with issues. I've had 3 veterans. All 3 have PTSD, every one of them. And 2 of them had traumatic brain injuries. And you say to yourself, why wasn't that caught and taken care of before they went back into society? And I just think we do a lousy job in transitioning people in a major life change from active duty back into civilian world.
I couldn't agree with you more, Paul. And it speaks to my story. When I was getting out, I went through I believe like a week-long transitioning course.
5 days. You got to see the slides.
Yeah, so I saw the slides as well. I saw the slides, and what I did, fortunately, I made appointments to the VA while I was active duty, and that just happened to give me a slight edge, so that I had appointments already prepared for me when I transition out. Unfortunately, like you said, every veteran is not thinking like that, because a lot of us are just focusing on getting out. So my landing was a bit soft, but even with it being soft, it was still really hard, because it was really hard navigating that. So now I left the VA and I decided to move back to New York City. What's out there? What can I get? How can I find purpose? Not only just with benefits, but just understanding people again. It took me a while to understand the civilian life. You know, I'm so used to orders and structure, and being told what to do and following that. And
breakfast is at this time.
Exactly. There's a certain system that we're used to, and we're trained from boot camp to following that kind of system. And so when you don't have that support anymore, trying to find your identity, that's what it speaks to again. Who you are now that the uniform is gone. Who are you now that your rank, all those things that you hold so dear and so proud of, is gone. How do you shine? How do you figure out life afterwards? And for some of us veterans, it's a lot harder. And it doesn't mean that they're weaker.
No.
We have to get rid of that idea of a broken soldier system kind of reference that if you need support, if you need help, that you're weak. It's actually different. It's actually the reverse. Get support and get help. And unfortunately, we didn't have that in our time getting out. But now there are agencies that are out there who are making themselves known to support, not only in mental health, but transitioning and having a softer support system when you come home. I couldn't agree more with you, Paul, with that.
Yes,
And I think that's one of the main reasons why agency was created, to give support to veterans, to help them navigate the system, because a lot of them don't know what resources they may be eligible for. So that's where we come in to help assist them in any way that we can.
And that's very important, that your existence is very important to them.
Yeah.
Because if I go back to my case, most of the guys that were getting out then, ironically, went into civil service. We became policemen, we became firemen, we became sanitation men, okay? And with that, we had a new identity,
Right.
okay? Because our health benefits and everything were all of a sudden covered by our new jobs and everything. And, well, we didn't need the VA anymore. We didn't need the VFW. We didn't need the American Legion. And it's like I said, it came to me and said, well, why don't you join the American Legion? Going way back in the 60s. And I said, well, I wasn't a vet, you know.
Right.
You know.
It's so true. And it's interesting because sometime I did some outreach actually in a couple of the colleges in New York City, just kind of connecting to the veterans who are just coming back home and using their education benefits. And what I recognize is that mentality. A lot of the times, because of the GI Bill being such a large amount, veterans right now are feeling like they don't necessarily need the post. They don't need the support. They don't understand that money runs out. Those jobs sometimes don't always prevail,
Right.
and life happens. And when life happens, you want a safety net. And so that's the important key to actually have those kind of connections, have that veteran community.
Very
because
important phrase you just used, safety net.
Exactly, it's a safety net. And we like to think of ourselves as a safety net as well. Veteran service organizations, but also our city agency, because we're that person, that go-to location that you can get those services and get that assistance and get that immediate attention from. So it's powerful.
But the other part of that, though, too, going back to the organizations, and I know a lot of the younger veterans do not join.
Yeah.
They do not. And there's impressions that it's a bunch of old men sitting around the bar drinking.
Yeah.
I mean, that is reality
Yeah.
in some people's minds. But the fact of the matter is, there's so much mentoring that goes on in those organizations. Just a silly example. Every February, it gets brought up at meetings and in our outreach to our members. Have you filed for your tax reduction? Because veterans that own property in New York City get a tax reduction, and it has to be in by March. But not all the veterans know. Every year there's somebody who says, what's that?
Yeah.
Okay? That's a significant item. That is mentoring. That is keeping somebody, hey, these are the things that you earned.
Yeah.
And that's why these are important. There are all types of information about different jobs that are available that go out during the meetings. These are the types of things, the reasons that you join these organizations. Plus, these are the organizations that are out there reminding the politicians that these are veterans, and veterans in general tend to vote.
Yes.
And by the way, if you get them annoyed because you don't do something that you should be doing for veterans, they are going to vote you out of office, and that is reality.
Yeah.
So it's important for the veterans to join the organizations for those reasons. And that's why I belong to both organizations. I belong, actually three. I belong to the Korean War veterans because I served in Korea. Let's see, 2004. I belong to the VFW because of my service in Korea and my service in Iraq. And I belong to the American Legion because I've served since 1975. So it's important to belong because all of those organizations are out there working up with the politicians to get the benefits. And right now, one of the big benefits packages that are out there for you old-time veterans, is the Blue Water Navy Act. Right now, that has passed the House and is up to the Senate, and that is covering the people that were exposed to Agent Orange while they served in ships offshore.
To Vietnam, then.
Yeah.
Yes, and women. But that's what those organizations do, and that's why it's important.
That's so true. And it's access to care. It's access. And when you have access, you have power because you have knowledge and you know what you can use and what can benefit you and your family. And one of the things that you mentioned that stood out to me was, which is true, is the Department of Finance. They have so many tax exemptions for veterans, and specifically that's really unique to Staten Island because of the houses and the housing that's there. So because you know a lot of house ownership is in Staten Island, that's a particularly unique benefit, and they often overlap. So you can get one for being a veteran, but then you can get one for disability that you may have that could be service connected. And so those are things that make a difference in someone's income and their life. So without having access to that information, it really hurts you in the long run.
Yes.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of our great things that we're doing at the agency, and it's really a service multiplier in the sense that we recently released and launched Vet Connect NYC. And Vet Connect NYC is, for the most part, an online portal, or online platform, but you can access it through text or through phone and online. And what it does is it gives veterans and their families access to an array of services without having to do the work. So if you have an issue, that's whether it's employment, whether it's benefits, whether it's navigating what you qualify for, in a sense, you can actually talk to a social service professional and they will actually do an intake on you and connect and do the work, do the footsteps of connecting you to services. So it's one of the things that the agency is really proud of, and we're really trying to push and promote out there because it's about access and about giving our veterans as much access and options as possible to make sure they have the life that they deserve and their needs are being met.
Very good. I have to ask you one more time, your email, and Eileen, if you can give us a phone number that they can reach you at.
Yes. So actually, I'm at the Staten Island twice a week. I'm there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. You can reach me via email at mrada@veterans.nyc.gov.
Right. And I'm the coordinator from Manhattan, so twice a week I'm in the Gail Brewer's office. My email is ebarcene@veterans.nyc.gov, and my phone number is 646-499-0055.
Very good. I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for being here and bringing so much information. And I'm going to tell you, you have to come back.
Absolutely.
You have to come back. And now, you work with Lori Sutton, the commissioner.
That's our commissioner.
A lovely, lovely person.
Yeah.
She's been here 3 times on the show with us. And we enjoy her company when she does come. So tell her we send our warmest regards.
We surely will.
Okay,
Thank you.
You've been watching In Honor Of, and it's been our great pleasure bringing this programming to you.